I think that the more that the children see this as normal behaviour to walk and cycle and protect the environment and look out for each other, we're keen to see how that sort of translates as the children themselves move through school and grow up with these really strong principles.
Welcome to the Carbon Copy Podcast with me, Isabel Sparrow. Episode 4, Taking to the Street. When I was a child, which wasn't that long ago, it was very unusual for anyone to be driven to primary school. The vast majority of pupils would walk with a parent or guardian, and some might ride bikes or walk with friends. Fast forward to today, and anyone who lives near a primary school or who has a primary-aged child will know it's a very different story. In this episode, I meet James Lucas, a father who was so alarmed by the lack of road safety at his children's school that he decided to take action and is now the lead steward for Norfolk's only School Street initiative.
I'm James Lucas. I'm a parent of, what was 2 children at Robert Kett, now 1 child. The other's now moved up to high school.
Robert Kett Primary School is just round the corner from my house in Wymondham. It is one of the biggest primary schools in Norfolk, with over 600 pupils and 3 classes per school year.
I've been cycling both from a sport and a mode of transport perspective all my life. For me, I wanted to make sure my children went to school on bikes. We're a mile and a half away from the school. When they were very young, it was too much to walk. So, we've balance biked and pedalled our way to school for most of their school life. So we just had to deal with the traffic every day. Very young children. We pass another primary school on the way to our school. And that is carnage outside as well. And the stress, everything that's involved in that. I started writing emails and letters to the police, the council, the school head, the governors, saying we've got to do something about it because it's dangerous. I didn't want it to be my children's lives or anybody else's children's lives that would fall victim to that carnage outside the school at drop-off pick-up time.
Cara Fahy is the head teacher at Robert Kett and told me that it was one particular incident that pushed her and the wider school community to look for a solution.
We had a really close near miss outside the front of school on collection after school on a really wet, windy, horrible autumn day, and one of the parents of the child who was nearly hit by one of the cars felt really passionately about actually we need to try and do something to try and improve the road safety outside the school. We've got 600 children here, so you can imagine at 3:15 that's a significant number of children, parents, guardians, carers, all leaving the school at the same time. So we set up a working party initially, and it really was just to reach out to any parents, carers who might be willing to join the working party. Obviously, then we had the world of COVID, so we met for the first year and a half pretty much virtually to try and brainstorm, think about what other things we could potentially do. And we'd come up with a few plans. We'd spoken to local councillors. We were looking at street signs, thinking about campaigning for 20 miles per hour. And then Sustrans obviously then approached Norfolk County Council, and then we were asked to consider if we would be a trial school. So that was really the starting point for school streets.
Although road safety is understandably the main priority for parents and school staff alike, there were other concerning issues that rose from the congestion at drop-off and pick-up times.
There was definitely a concern. There were people turning up and they're idling cars. We had the MP, George Freeman, came out and even he commented how visceral the smell and the taste of the air was at the time, that it was fine. And then as the cars build up, you could taste it, and then it was that relief when the cars went away that you suddenly realised that, there's a lot of pollution in the air.
So what exactly does having a school street entail? I spoke to Jeremy Wiggin, Head of Sustainable Transport at Norfolk County Council, to find out more.
The whole principle is to close the roads outside schools at its busiest times. There's quite a few cities already that were running school streets trials, so we've been keeping an eye on that and seeing how that developed. Some funding came available from the Department for Transport to look at sustainable transport, particularly around schools. So we set up a trial with 6 schools initially, and we wanted to very much learn from those 6 schools as to what it takes. So sort of lessons learned that we could then apply more widely across Norfolk.
There are various national organisations that support councils and schools to implement programmes like this locally. The Robert Kett School Street was supported by Sustrans, a charity working across the country to make it easier for everyone to walk, wheel and cycle. I spoke with their senior project manager, David Burt, who led the project in Wymondham, to find out more about the history of the programme and how it is being implemented in other parts of the country.
I think the first one was actually in Italy in the late 80s. And then it came across to the UK with the first school street starting in Edinburgh in 2015 and in London in 2017. There are upwards of 900 schools with school streets across the country, but that's always changing as some schools start and some others end. And it's sort of expanded from there, really. Some local authorities use cameras to enforce the closure of the road. And other places use sort of volunteers, road closed signs and some barriers to sort of temporarily close the road. You can also use sort of pop-up bollards and things like that as well to close the road. So there are a number of different sort of options, but effectively the ultimate aim is to create a sort of a quieter, safer, more sort of healthy place for people to spend time and encourage the children and the families to sort of walk, wheel and cycle to school.
I wanted to see the school street in action, so James invited me to join him stewarding one day at school pickup time. He rode his bike to meet me at my house, and the two of us took a short walk to Robert Kett. As we walked, we chatted about James's experience of taking his kids to school by bike.
We're just leaving my house, which is about a 10-minute walk from Robert Kett Primary School, which is where the school street is set up. And I'm with James, who's got his bike, but he's not riding it because I wouldn't be able to keep up. It looks like quite a fast bike. So how old are your children?
So my son's just turned 13, so he's in high school. And my daughter's just turned 10, so she's in year 5.
Has anyone been inspired to kind of ditch the car, knowing them and knowing that they always cycled to school?
Yeah, when my son was sort of wanting to cycle more, and some of his friends were still even going to like high school, some of them still being dropped off in a car. And so him showing them that, oh, you're allowed to go. They then probably did go and ask their parents, and then suddenly they're all going, oh yeah, we can stop and get some sweets at the co-op if you don't, and that sort of thing. And suddenly, it let them find their own freedom, and then they could go to the rec ground after school and things like that. And so, I suppose indirectly that, they have had hopefully some positive influence on their friends. And I know lots of people who've, since we've put the school street in, they've tried walking and cycling more in the summer months. So come the summer term, you'll find a lot more will then go and cycle. But it does have to come with political change and infrastructure and other things that say, do you know what, it is safe to do this. And that's why closing the road, it does make it safe. And so parents can drop their children off, even if they drive them to school. They don't have to necessarily park. They can let them get out on the side of the road, knowing they just walk around the corner and they'll be in the safe zone of the school street.
We arrive at the school and James puts his bike somewhere safe and signs in at reception. He puts on a high-vis vest and grabs a radio before coming back out to collect the large road closed signs and extendable barriers needed for each end of the closure.
Welcome to the school street. Just collecting the barriers and the signs from the school. Just about to take them out to put on the road. Thank you very much, Roger.
James is so committed to this initiative, but even he admits that recruiting and retaining volunteers to steward the street has at times been difficult.
That's our biggest challenge, really, is volunteers, because you have to make sure there's somebody there every day to take the barrier in or out, and being able to keep enough people constantly available. So as my children all disappear from the school, am I going to carry on and come back to do it? probably would and probably will. If that's the difference between it working and not working, I would do that. But not everybody's going to want to make that commitment ongoing to turn up to a school that they no longer have children at, to close that road. So it's something we need to think about for the future as a kind of succession planning for the volunteers, but also for the council to kind of hopefully put in place systems, ways of actually managing these on a long-term basis.
So, if there are other ways to run a school street, why was the volunteer-led approach used here in Wymondham? Here's David from Sustrans.
The reason why a lot of local authorities haven't gone down the camera approach is because it's only recently been legalised outside London. So prior to sort of last summer, I think it was, only London had the powers to enforce a school street using cameras. That's now changed. So there are local authorities in the UK that are starting to use a camera to enforce school streets, but that's a relatively slow rollout. So we are starting to see that more. But in Norfolk, I think they've got the powers to do it, but haven't yet sort of started using them. That's why mainly local authorities have been looking at that volunteer-led approach. And it is a very cheap, easy, quick way of trialling a school street, seeing if it works, and then you can always look to enforce it with cameras at a later date if it does.
I asked Jeremy from Norfolk County Council about the successes and challenges they had encountered with the school streets trials in other parts of the county.
It does require a level of support from the school and time that the school needs to put in. And what we found was that some schools that we wanted to sort of work with were unable to commit that sort of time because they had other commitments at the time. Obviously, what we're doing is we're disrupting people's normal travel behaviour, if you like, or 2 times the day at school drop-off and at school pick-up time. That in itself generated a fair amount of sort of concern amongst maybe local residents or for people who are trying to go about their business, just their day-to-day business around the school. So a lot of it has been a real learning curve in terms of how do you engage with the community and actually get the buy-in that's needed from so many people for such a trial to take place.
Cara has been instrumental in getting the school street set up, but also in supporting its ongoing success. I asked her if there were any concerns initially about what the local reaction would be.
Yeah, we did have some concerns because, there were lots of reasons why it would be successful, but we also had to consider how it might be perceived by local residents, local community, possibly parent carers, etc. It was a trial, so we didn't know what the long-term sustainability would be. But as head of the school, I felt like we'd been working together on trying to improve road safety. And actually, if we didn't partake in this trial and if something happened, it's always that what if, isn't it? That I felt actually the benefits outweighed what might be perceived as possible negatives in that way.
We've been standing out by the road closed signs for a while. So far, everyone has been really friendly. James has to let some traffic through. The road is a public bus route, and also parents and guardians of students with accessibility needs are given special passes to allow them through the closure and right up to the school gates. I asked James more about this.
As well as the road danger, the importance is for people with mobility issues, accessibility requirements. They're the people who need to be able to get close to the school, whether it's the parent, carer or the child. And when you've got people who do not have those requirements taking up those spaces in front of the school, then you're suddenly in a position where there are people with far greater need having to park further away or make certain decisions about how they park or where they park. So, absolutely. One of our priority is that if you are picking up or dropping off at the school, then through a process of applying to the head teacher, people can apply for an exemption sticker, and we supply the sticker, or the head teacher supplies the sticker. They can display that in the car and we allow them in and out of the closure. Obviously there's conditions of driving at walking pace and not parking on the pavements and other things. But yeah, the principle is that people have access to get to the school if they have that need for access.
So somebody who has an exemption, they have a little sticker in their window, they've just turned up to the barrier, so I'll just let them pass the barrier. So that's basically me for half an hour, just checking who's got passes and who hasn't, and letting appropriate people in and keeping inappropriate people out.
Even though this road has been closing twice a day, every weekday during term time for 2 years now, James still encounters drivers who are unaware and need to be redirected.
Hey?
Can I go through the other way?
No, this road's closed. Yeah, so where do you need to get to, sir?
I'm going to what is it? Is it next time the left?
Hewitt's Lane or Folly Road? Folly Road for the high school, yeah. So you're best off going back to Tuttle's Lane and then take a left and then left again onto Melton Road, and then you can come back down the other side, down Ethel Gooch Road, okay? Thank you.
This exchange was very amicable, but James tells me occasionally interactions with motorists have been less positive, and I found myself wondering if this was another reason that volunteers might be reluctant to get involved. According to David at Sustrans, though, the negativity that one might expect from schemes like this is from a very tiny minority, and actually school streets are a very popular intervention.
We've seen really strong support for school streets across the board, pretty much. They need to be rolled out sensibly. It's always useful to trial them, but on the whole, they are really positively received. We're talking 80, even 90% support for the schemes. So, you know, it's definitely something that councils shouldn't be afraid to try. In terms of Norfolk, I mean, when we did the analysis of the data, it again showed a strong support for the schemes, and that's all three of the school streets that we rolled out. And we looked at, you know, we analysed data from residents, parents and students and staff, and that support was pretty consistent amongst all those groups. It did vary more among residents, depending on the sort of impact it had on the residents and things, especially those that were sort of outside the closure zone. But it was still a majority of support, which is brilliant to see and really encouraging, especially, like you said, in Norfolk, where there are more challenges in terms of other sort of options people have in terms of public transport and, you know, active travel. So it is more challenging. I would congratulate Norfolk on being ambitious with their school street programme. You know, they didn't just stick to Norwich, which a lot of people might think they would. They were ambitious in choosing the schools that were in slightly more rural locations, and they did show that it could work. You know, there was support, like I said, across all three of the schools that we rolled out. And the school that has lasted the longest is in, you know, a small market town, which it just goes to show it can be done and it can be popular. So, yeah, massively congratulate them on that. And fingers crossed that sort of model can be rolled out to other schools as well.
There has definitely been a huge positive impact from the school street here. Jeremy from Norfolk County Council tells me about some of the evidence they've gathered to support this.
I think that the more that the children see this as normal behaviour to walk and cycle and protect the environment and look out for each other, we're keen to see how that sort of translates as the children themselves move through school and grow up with these really strong principles. In terms of the feedback that we've had from parents and from children, it's been really positive overall. You know, we're using Robert Kett really as our case study, and just some typical figures. The number of children travelling actively to schools has increased from 45% to 54%. The number of children who've been driven to school has dropped from 36% to 27%. One of the really interesting ones is those who said the street outside the school is safe for everyone has increased from a really low figure of 12% to nearly 50%. In terms of the sort of air quality issues, again, some really positive impacts there, where those who felt the air is now cleaner and better outside the school has gone from 34% to 66%. So that's a doubling. And it's those sorts of feedback and statistics that we really want to sort of take forward and replicate at other schools across Norfolk.
James has also felt positive personal impacts from leading the programme.
If I wasn't doing this, I wouldn't have spoken to as many of the other parents and that in the school. You know, it's, I think just for myself personally, it's definitely had a social community feel about it for me. You know, you're speaking to other parents. I like to think that we've made a difference, and that to me is a big thing. It's been a massive change. It's quite nice to feel that you've been part of a cultural change there. This is the first time, as I say, I've ever put my head above the parapet to say we need some change, you know. I would never have gone on camera or spoken, and now I've been on the radio, you know, photos in the paper and that sort of thing, and that's something I would never have done before. And it's made me actually appreciate people who do that, you know, people who go and protest on the street or, you know, fight for causes. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts to do that.
Carbon Copy is about inspiring people across the UK to come together and collectively take more action for climate and nature. More children walking, wheeling and cycling to school is undeniably beneficial to reducing emissions and improving air quality, on top of the obvious road safety improvements brought by the scheme. I asked Cara what advice she would give to head teachers at other schools thinking of implementing something like this.
I would say go for it. I would say stand fast with the fact that you don't rely on your school staff to run the school streets, because schools are already really stretched. And from the outset, I made it very clear that that wasn't going to be part of my vision. Myself and the deputy, we both do school streets at various shifts during the week, which I think is really important because it shows to the parents, the children, that it's a priority for the leaders of the school. So I would think about how you market it, how do you communicate it with parents, carers and the local community. And, you know, it is a bit of extra work, but once you've got it up and running and you've got the systems in place, it does work itself. And I think, you know, it's another mechanism of making sure that children are safe.
Back to the school street now, and the last of the children and parents have just about trickled past, so it's time for James and his fellow volunteer to take the signs in and open the road up once again.
Just open the barrier and closing up the sign, removing the sandbags, and the road is open.
I've loved chatting to James, Jeremy, David and Cara. I feel genuinely inspired by the collective effort they and others involved have made to change things for the better here in Wymondham. If you would like to find out more about school streets and other initiatives that help to support children to travel to school safely and in less polluting ways, you can find links in the show notes. You've been listening to the Carbon Copy podcast. It was written and presented by me, Isabel Sparrow. The producer and editor was Bradley Ingham. Huge thanks to my guests and to Sustrans, Norfolk County Council and Robert Kett Primary School for their support with this episode. Please do share the pod with anyone you think would enjoy it, and even better, leave us a review to help more people discover us. Bye for now.